What's up, everyone? Welcome back to the Hawks Premier podcast, hosted by myself, David Lee. Um, I know it's not exactly a great time for Hawks basketball right now, but I would definitely appreciate it if you guys like and comment, subscribe, share the show. I want to start off today's show just with a sort of a diatribe, or just sort of talking through the state of the Hawks. So, 8 losing streak, lost by 9 to the Knicks, 10 to the Pistons, by 3 to the Raptors, negative 23. By 23 to the Raptors, that's when we lost Jalen Johnson. By 8 to the Timberwolves, by 4 to the Houston, by 22 to Cleveland, and by 5 to Indiana. And so what stands out to me there, besides the two big losses to Toronto, Cleveland, the margin of loss, like the actual losing margin, has not been egregiously bad, okay, over this losing streak. This isn't a typical losing streak. Of course, the Hawks are injured. They don't have their second best player. They're currently sitting in Bogdanovich and Clint Capella, most likely not because they're hurt, but probably because they're saving them in case a trade somewhat manifests itself. And so with all those things considered, how shorthanded they are, the fact that they're really dealing with a different rotation every night, there are positives to take away. But unequivocally, this has been a bad stretch of basketball. And the Hawks in particular have played really good basketball at some times throughout the stretch. So against Indiana, they went down 18 in the second quarter, shifted to a zone defense, and ended up getting all the way back into the game, took the lead, just wasn't able to execute down the stretch. So we'll talk a little bit about the defense that powered that, Dyson and then Zachary Zacch, in particular for that game. I think the most frustrating part about this most recent stretch, at least for me and I'm sure for other Hawks fans, is that we showed that we could be a good team this season. With Jalen Johnson, DeAndre Hunter, and Trae Young in the lineup, the Hawks were 15-9. They had a net rating of plus 13.6 per 100 possessions with those guys on the floor. But the issue is, of course, is that they only played 24 games together and they only share the court for 700 possessions. So availability has always been a big question in the Hawks in the Trae Young era. Like, Trae has always been available, but the wing room has been historically unreliable, and that's not just production, but in terms of actually ability to be on the court. DeAndre Hunter's had his knee issues. Jalen Johnson has gotten very unfortunate with some of these issues. I don't think he's injury prone by any means. I don't think this is like I have seen some Hawks fans saying like, "Oh, this is DeAndre Hunter all over again." I don't think it's the same thing. Like a shoulder or an ankle, those aren't degenerative conditions like it is with DeAndre Hunter and his knees, or with Bogdanovich and his knees. Those are a little bit more problematic, and I do think I'm fully expecting Jalen to make a full recovery. But I think the part about this is not only have the Hawks demonstrated they can beat good teams. I mean, they had the most wins in the NBA, the third most wins in the NBA against teams that had 30 or more wins. Only OKC and I think it was Boston, or only OKC and Houston had more wins against those. They've gone toe-to-toe with the best in the East. The East in particular is pretty wide open this year. You look at the standings, and Philly is probably going to get back into the play-in at this rate. Indiana had an incredibly slow start. They're up to the 4th seed. And you look at from 5 below, Orlando's on their similar sort of trajectory as the Hawks. They're on a 3-game losing streak, but they're 2-8 in their last 10, just like we are. The Pistons have been around 500 the whole season. Chicago made a move, but they're going to definitely try and bottom out. And so it's really just, I know the plan shouldn't be like a bar, but there's just no way that the Hawks, fully healthy, we're not going to be a top 6 seed in this version of the East. And barring like a huge jump from one of the young guys and some really fortunate shooting luck, that's probably not going to happen this season. It's really, really unfortunate because I think they were on pace to really finish with 42 plus wins, which is, again, in the transition year where you're playing a lot of young guys minutes. You're trying to see what Dyson can do offensively, trying to see what Zachary Zacch can do offensively. You're bringing on Yeko Okongwu as a starter. It's just really, really unfortunate. And I think for Jalen Johnson, these reps are necessary. I think he got some very conducive reps early in the season, playing about 40 games, but the most improved player trophy was probably going to be his. And so it really sucks that he's not going to be able to get that. But as a scoring option, in terms of like his development as a scorer for himself, like these is going to be very necessary reps for him. It would have been nice to see him get some reps in the playoffs in particular, but that's looking further and further as the Hawks continue to free fall. But again, with the state of the East right now, I mean, Toronto is winning a lot of games, but I don't think they particularly want to make the play-in. Like the Hawks may just make the play-in by virtue of being just good enough. And it's really frustrating because they should have had a better season, and they deserve to have a better season for the way they were over exceeding expectations. But with all that being said, I do think that at the end of the day, this Hawks team was not going to contend for a championship. And this season in particular was always about figuring out, okay, what do we have with our young guys? What does Dyson look like scaled up offensively? What can Ricochet do with a little bit more responsibility? Can Onyeka be a full-time starter? Can Kobe Buffkin, again, upset that he doesn't get those minutes to develop as well? But what do we have with the young guys? And the fact that they've been able to build one of the best defenses in the league over the last 10 games, even during this losing streak, and that's against offenses that have been pretty good this season. So right now, the Hawks I think they were ninth in defense over the last 2 weeks before they ended up losing to Indiana, and they gave up a lot of points, so they probably may have fallen a little bit. And they definitely did. Yeah, they fell to 22nd after that, which is kind of crazy. But when you look at how they performed against top 10 offenses all season, they've actually been pretty good, and they've been one of the best teams in the league against the best offenses in the league. So that just gives them a good floor when they do get that offensive development from a Zachary Ricochet, from a Dyson Daniels, and we're starting to see that more and more often. They're an above average defense against top 10 offenses, or at least they were at some point. Oh, I'm looking at the wrong season. That's why I was about to say, like, there's no way they were that bad. But against the best offensive teams in the league, they've actually been pretty good. I'm just waiting on the numbers to come up. And even when you're seeing the offensive struggles from, it could be Ricochet, sometimes it's Dyson Daniels from a night-to-night basis. These guys they have a lot of games where they're showing that aggression. For example, the Hawks have played 18 games against top 10 offenses. They have the 7th best defense in the league against those teams. That's nothing to sneeze at. That's real palpable progress on the defensive end, and that's with guys in and out of the lineup. That's with a lack of consistency in terms of not just starting lineups, but the overall rotation. You guys getting called up from the G League, stuff like that, and it hasn't necessarily impacted their ability to play defense, which is very, very impressive for this Hawks team. And again, not something that we're necessarily used to. So goals going forward for this season is honestly just to keep seeing what you have from the young guys. I know that Hawks fans in particular are getting a little bit antsy during the deadline. I was actually preparing to make this video, or this podcast episode yesterday, and then the Luka trade broke, and I could not think about anything else in the next 4 hours. And I was just talking about it. And now you have the Sacramento deal that came out where De'Aaron Fox is pairing up with Wembanyama. And for Hawks fans and myself, it's like, well, Trey's in his 7th year and he still hasn't played with an all-star. Wembanyama has gotten his pairing now. You're just sort of seeing these guys and teams somewhat building more ambitiously around their guys. And I know that Hawks fans are itching to see a move of that caliber or that ilk for Trae Young and the Hawks this season. And honestly, I would heavily advise against making that type of move. And I also am not necessarily expecting that type of move. The best or the splashiest move I could see is maybe a Brandon Ingram thing. And you want to be as minimal with the assets you give out for that as possible. Like Brandon Ingram, I've long held the belief that he could come in as one of the better wings next to Trae Young because of his ability to attack mismatches, the playmaking. He's unequivocally a top 5 playmaker at his position. If you want to look at any sort of his playmaking stats, like he's always been very productive in those situations. And that's, again, not even in a great offensive situation in New Orleans where, yeah, he does have Zion to sort of take the pressure off of him, but the spacing was never at his best. And he's always been at his best, too, next to a great point guard. So those years that he had Lonzo was definitely one of the best that he had. He's among the league leaders in potential assists per 1 minute on the ball. He's averaged about 15 potential assists per 100. And so for comparison's sake, if you look at DeAndre Hunter, who right now is fulfilling the role that Brandon Ingram would play, DeAndre Hunter he's never averaged above 6 in a full season. And right now he's averaging 4.4 potential assists per 100 and just 2 per 1 minute on the ball. So he injects playmaking. He injects more reliable scoring. We've seen this season that when DeAndre Hunter is overextended or when the Hawks are overly reliant on his production, it kind of kicks them. It kind of like bites them because they don't have anyone else who can get to their spots reliably outside of Trae. And even then, his scoring is up and down and inconsistent. So bringing another sort of guy who can get buckets to simplify it makes sense. But he also opens up the overall offensive potential as well because of the passing, the playmaking, the size. And then he kind of just gives guys a little bit more of a go-to. So, like, for example, if you watch the Pacers game against the Hawks, Pascal Siakam is the go-to scorer for Indiana. And so when they weren't able to get into their offense, whether it was out in transition or driving and kicking, it was okay. Let's get Siakam in the block. Let's get Siakam in an inverted screen roll. Let's get Siakam at the nail. Let's get him at the elbow. And that's not necessarily something that the Hawks have. Like when DeAndre Hunter has to create for himself, when he has to go to the post and go to work, he's so much better attacking a closeout. He's so much better shooting off of Trae Young's passes. And just right now, this team is overly reliant on Trae, which was always what was going to happen because you have a young team. But there's no reason for the Hawks to try and rush to make this deal. Brandon Ingram is going to be an unrestricted free agent this upcoming summer, which means you have the risk of him not re-signing with Atlanta, but it also means that you potentially could sway him to sign in Atlanta. Now, the reporting has been that he wants $30-40 million. That's not going to happen. I don't think any team will give him that. So the Hawks are able to swing a trade at a discount, severe discount, especially with the fact that Luka just got one first-round pick, and that's with me understanding Anthony Davis is worth multiple. Maybe you consider that. But outside of that, I really don't know what other trade is available or any trade that would make sense. Like there's no reason, again, for the Hawks to further mortgage their future in an attempt to try and salvage this season. Unfortunately, I just think development is the number one priority for this team. And not only do I think that, I believe that, I think that's what they believe. And they're not going to make the same mistake they made with DeJounte Murray, which is overreact, overextend yourself, and lock yourself into a pairing that just doesn't work. If they make a trade, I expect it to be for a big, not a big. I expect them to trade for a wing / a forward. I do think we'll probably see something with Bogdan Bogdanović and Clint Capella, maybe something to Denver, maybe something to Phoenix. I don't think it'll be something super splashy, but the Hawks may be getting some future assets back, some young guys. That's probably what I'm more so anticipating, not a huge like, okay, we just got Kevin Durant. Don't necessarily think that's on the margin. So that out the way, let's talk a little bit about this Pacers game. I was somewhat nervous going into this game just because the Pacers have been playing really good basketball. They're probably the best team in the league in January. They went 10-2. They have really turned it up on both ends. And there were a number of things that I thought were really important takeaways from this game. The first thing I want to look at, though, is the defense that actually got the Hawks back into the game. And that's what, again, like I've made this point multiple times on the podcast, but that's a foreign concept in Atlanta. The Hawks defense has not been what's led them to win games at really any point. But that's exactly what we got in last night's game. So let me pull up that real quick. So the Hawks played a very inventive zone coverage against Indiana. And they went to this because their man-to-man defense just wasn't robust enough in that first quarter. Indiana had 40 points in the fourth. They were getting in the first quarter, sorry. They would get whatever they wanted. A lot of driving kick, a lot of penetration, lots of open threes generated as a result. And so Atlanta opted to go into this 3-2 defense or 3-2 shell, but it's actually a matchup zone. So if you look at the screen, you've got your three guards, Garrison Matthews, Trae Young, and V. Krejci at the top of this zone. And you've got the wings and the bigs at the bottom in a 3-2 shell. But this is actually more than just 3-2, right? So notice how the Hawks are communicating and moving as the Pacers move around. And so this is actually a matchup zone, with the biggest principle being don't let the ball get in the middle or driven from the top of the key, and trying to pick up cutters as they flash throughout. So notice DeAndre Hunter, Garrison Matthews saying, okay, look, here comes TJ McConnell. Garrison saying, Andrew Nembhard is behind you, Dre, pay attention. He slides over to Nembhard. Larry Nance lifts up to sort of try and cover up TJ McConnell. And you get a much more malleable zone that can shift and morph as the offense is trying to poke holes through it. And so this, again, is called a matchup zone. It's sort of a zone with man-to-man principles where if someone comes into your zone in the area you're supposed to be guarding, you follow them throughout. The Hawks are very intentional about not letting the ball get into the middle. That's the weak point of most zones. Same thing with this one. A lot of times you'll try to see teams try to set screens in the middle to create those vulnerabilities. Here, the Hawks are able to bottle up that drive, and this ends up being an offensive foul, I believe, or 3 seconds. I'm not exactly sure. I can't even see what official made the call. I think it's a travel on Nembhard. Yeah, because he slid his foot back. But the biggest reason why the Hawks do this is to try and get Indiana out their flow. This is a very high-paced, high octane offense. They want to move quickly. They want to make quick decisions. They want to be able to get downhill. Playing against the zone makes you think, makes you try to poke out the vulnerabilities. And so it's used to slow down games and slow down penetration. And that's exactly what the Hawks were able to do. He's another look at that zone. So a similar shell, but here you have Zachary Regis-Shea down low with Larry Nance. They really wanted to turn to this defense when Nance was the only big on the floor. Clint Capella is out with back spasms. And then Don Barlow and Muhammad Gay are the only guys with the true 4 size. So especially when they have Garrison Matthews and Vit Krejci on the floor, you want to try and insulate them. Even though those guys compete on defense, there's still liabilities because of their size and their frame. And here you can see why that can be an issue for someone like Vit. Like Andrew Nembhard just blows through him, and it turns into an and one. And so his lack of strength was kind of an issue in tonight's game. He's still a great team defender, and he's in the right position more often than not. But he's very frail, for lack of a better term, a little bit spindly compared to some other guys. And so guys are able to somewhat go through him. This is with Don Barlow as the 4-man in this lineup. You have Dyson at the top of the key to defend. Now, again, watch the Hawks' communication here. Garrison Matthews sinks as Benedict Mathurin drives, tells Don Barlow pick him up. Then Garrison comes back to zone up against Pascal Siakam. Now, remember, the thing is not letting the ball get into the middle. So Don Barlow steps up. Garrison Matthews also steps up. And Andrew Nembhard looks away from making this pass, which breaks down the zone, of course, because now you would have Siakam with a lane to the rim. They want to dissuade this pass as much as possible. Trey's denying to make Halliburton catch a ball up higher. This also was designed to try and keep Halliburton out of the game, make him a little bit more passive. So the Pacers at this point, they're just sort of passing the ball around the key. And then you get the middle of the ball screen from Miles Turner. Trey pinches the drive to try and keep Nembhard from getting downhill. He's able to get downhill. Pretty big push off right here that gets Dyson off balance, but Dyson is still in range, so he's not confident in getting the shot up. Now, this is where you see the power of the matchup zone, right? Benedict Mathurin ends up leaking over here, and Dyson Daniels decides to just peel off and go man-to-man. So at this point, the Hawks are man-to-man. Larry Nance, Trey is matched up against Tyrese, but Larry Nance falls back to him. He tells Trey, you'll go get Nembhard. Trey goes to get Nembhard, and now the Hawks are man-to-man. And so this is the power of playing that matchup zone, but it's all completely driven by the fact that Dyson Daniels can switch and toggle off of matchups, and he can pick up on those things very quickly. And then everyone else around him finds their matchup. Boom. And now you get a tough contested step back 3 with 2 seconds on the shot clock, as opposed to the drive and kick offense that the Pacers were able to get to pretty easily in the first quarter. So here in semi-transition, the Hawks get into their shell, 3-2 shell. You got your bigs down low. Indiana somewhat seemed like they didn't know exactly how to attack this. There was a lot of standing, waiting, trying to survey the floor. Here Miles Turner comes up to set the screen on Dyson Daniels. And here's where you can see some of the value of course, having a guy like Turner who can stretch the floor at his size, and he knocks his 3 down. But you much prefer a top of the key 3, even if that, honestly, for Miles Turner, it's probably his game, but they want to keep the ball from being driven in these cases and getting all the way to the rim here, which is why you see Larry Nance step up so aggressively. Turner, to his credit, knocks that shot down. Then we have, I think, a couple other possessions here. So here, it's Onyeka and Dre, who are the bottom 2 in this zone. Garrison Matthews had himself a second quarter, by the way. I think he had 14 points. So here you see Aaron Nesmith is cutting through. Dre's communicating. Garrison Matthews communicating. He's like, Onyeka, pick him up as he comes around this pin down. So he's saying, Onyeka, get to him. Trey's also telling him, but you need to make sure you pick him up. Onyeka comes out. Then you have Garrison Matthews saying, look, Dre, you need to pick up Pascal Siakam. And this is good communication here from the Hawks. Trey wants to float over to Siakam. He sees that he's open, but he's like, actually, I'll peel off the Nembhard, and it's a pull-up midi that Siakam knocks down. But it's much preferred that he's taking this shot as opposed to the types of shots they were getting in that first quarter. Here's another instance. So the Pacers, again, just kind of were very passive trying to attack this zone for the most part. A lot of dribbling around, not really knowing where they want to go with it. They're not sure where Miles Turner wants to set the screen. Standing, surveying, a little bit of hesitancy here. And then the Hawks decide to go into man here. So because Miles Turner dives, and the Hawks are pretty much zoned up at this point. They go to straight man. Then let's see if Halliburton can do anything against Garrison Matthews. He's not able to do it, and he misses the shot. Now, in terms of effectiveness, the Hawks in the first half allowed 66% shooting from the Pacers in the half court on 19 field goal attempts. In the second half, that fell to just 44% on 18 field goal attempts. So a much improved defensive output once they switched to the zone. They went back and forth to it throughout the game, but that was a really nice defensive wrinkle from Quinn Snyder, especially when he doesn't have the requisite size of Jalen Johnson out, Clint Capella out, guys like that. It was a nice way to be inventive and sort of take advantage of the fact that Indiana doesn't have a ton of very aggressive downhill drivers in the half court. Like they're very good at attacking closeouts, which is why using the zone to try and shrink the court and make it tougher for them to drive and penetrate made a lot of sense. While I really like what they did with the zone, one area that was very frustrating to watch was how they handled the minutes with Onyeka Okongwu off the floor. They ended up opting to put some pretty small lineups on the floor with Larry Nance at the 5, and it made it very tough for the Hawks to contain Obi Toppin, who scored 18 points in 13 minutes. And a lot of those minutes came with Larry Nance at the center and the Hawks without a true 4 on the floor. At this point, it's DeAndre Hunter, but this is nice floor balance attained by the Pacers, where I'm pretty sure this was a screen and roll with Toppin and TJ McConnell. They ended up forcing the switch. Then Trey does a good job to peel off, but at this point, the Pacers are able to get them in a rotation, and then Toppin is able to get on the glass as a result of that sort of compromise here. So this is, again, very nice. This is a great way for Atlanta to navigate that mismatch. This is something we saw them do against Boston when they were to pick up their second win. But now you have Trey trying to box out Thomas Bryant, who actually was not ready for the ball at all, and it ends up deflecting to Larry Nance. Not Larry Nance, to Obi Toppin. But Toppin really became a problem the more he realized that he could just sort of throw his size around. So here, the Pacers trying to force this switch. He walks Trey down to the paint. Trey does a good job of getting off of him, but the guy who's now guarding Obi Toppin also cannot compete with him physically, and that's Vikuchu, who just does not have the size or the strength. And Toppin is able to go right around him. Help comes from Dre, but it's kind of funny. Like, obviously I understand why his hands are up. But at this point, like, Toppin's not thinking about passing. So there has to be either way more aggressive help, and they have to try and make him a passer. Like, Toppin's not going to kill you as a passer. But this is, I think, is more so of a function of just the defensive personnel. Like, it's just kind of tough for the Hawks to defend guys like Obi Toppin with the guys they have out. And this is very intentional from Indiana. This is why Thomas Bryant's at the top of the key. They're trying to get Obi Toppin a touch in the paint. They're able to do it, and he takes advantage of the lack of size. And it was just a very simple, very effective game from Obi because he had a massive advantage against anyone he had to face. So here, because of the cross match and transition, Larry Nance has to step up and guard Andrew Nembhard. That leaves no semblance of rim protection, and Obi Toppin's able to just get rim. Here, he's just going to drive against Vite. Vite closes out, makes good contact, but he just can't contain that much strength and size. Fouls and 1. Here, you're going to see him just get on the offensive glass. Opportunistic. It's a unfortunate bounce for the Hawks. But where I think he really made himself a problem was sealing and transition. He was able to get some free throws out of this as well, but here Garrison Matthews shoots 3, misses. Because Toppin's the one who's contesting it, he's also the first one down the floor for the Pacers, and he just immediately established his position, and Garrison Matthews gives up an N1. Like, that's a disaster there. If you're going to foul, just foul him, man. Don't even try to front him. Like, just wrap him up as soon as he catches it. Here's another example of Toppin just realizing, look, I'm faster, I'm quicker, I'm more athletic than these guys. So he has Garrison Matthews on him here. And as Garrison comes to close out, this is really bad technique. He leaves himself wide open to get driven to the middle, especially with the lack of rim protection on the floor and the fact that they're playing a zone. Or at this point, I think they were playing man, but you just cannot allow Well, yeah, they are playing zone. I'm sorry, because they have Tars right at the top of the key and Nance is down. So they're playing a zone. You can't let the ball go middle. That's the number one principle. You have to fight. You cannot allow this to happen. Like, and he allows it to happen and gets his teammate dunked on. Now, the thing that makes that frustrating isn't that I think the Hawks could have magically stopped him, or like even that Obi Toppin in general. Like, are you okay with him beating you? It's just Muhammad Gay didn't play any minutes. Dominic Barlow started. He only played 13 minutes. I don't see any reason why, once you see that Obi Toppin is causing a lot of problems with his size and strength, put a guy out there that's similarly sized. Okay. And I know Quinn is trying to balance offensive versus defensive tilts and lineups. And it's true that this Hawks team really struggles to create points with Trey off the floor. They were a minus 62.2 in terms of net rating in the 9 minutes he was off the floor. I think about like halfway through the third quarter. And that's a nightly occurrence, right? So that's why he has Vita out there. That's why he has Garrison Matthews out there. But you cannot, in any way, shape, or form, have Keaton Wallace, Garrison Matthews, Vite Krejci, DeAndre Hunter, and Larry Nance on the floor and expect to be able to defend or contain someone like Obi Toppin. It's barbecue chicken. Like, there's Larry Nance is already limited with his hand. He's a small ball center to start with, and then you have DeAndre Hunter, who's not a four out there. If you're going to throw a lineup like that with Garrison Matthews and Vite Krejci on the floor together, I think once the team starts to take advantage of that, you have to put Dom Barlow on the floor or Muhammad Gay. I would have liked to see him just get a little bit more run for Barlow, maybe get some minutes for Muhammad Gay. Ended up not happening. And, at the end of the day, like, it may have not changed the outcome of the game, but I think that adjustment was necessary just because they were exploiting it way too easily. So I want to talk about Dyson Daniels real quick, who had one of his best offensive games, in my opinion, especially from an aggression standpoint. It reminded me a lot of how he looked against Boston when we beat them without Trey. Finished with 23 points on 15 shots, 5 of 6 from the free throw line, which is great that he was able to get there and knock those down. He drew 4 fouls in particular. In his last 5 games, he's averaging 15 points, 48% from the field, 46% from three on 3 threes per game. And he's, of course, pairing that with his typical defense, averaging 3 steals over that stretch as well. And a 2.36 assist to turnover ratio, drawing 3 fouls a game. So the aggression's ticking up. The effectiveness has followed. And it's a really encouraging sign that he's sort of finding his stride in his role offensively for the Sox team. And it's becoming more and more consistent. That was one of his biggest issues in New Orleans. He wasn't able to maintain that aggression. But what I think is really nice about his situation here in Atlanta is that he can sort of oscillate in terms of his role, right? So when Trey's on the floor, he's more so doing a more like a read to react and trying to play out of structure and cutting and making himself available to guys, right? So this play, when I initially saw it, I was really excited to see Onyeka make this read, right? So Dyson immediately, he gives the ball up and he's immediately going backdoor. Yeah, he recognizes that Miles Turner's pressed up on Onyeka so that the paint is wide open. He cuts, gets dunk. And when I saw this play, I was like, man, that's a really nice pass from Onyeka. And honestly, like on the rewatch, he probably should have thrown it a little bit further ahead of him, like right here. Dyson had to reach back and grab it, but the adjustment, the hands, like I don't know how this got through Benedict Matherin's reach. That's beautiful. Another thing I want to point out is Trey cutting at the same time, which keeps Siakam from helping. He has no visibility on what's going on. And then Onyeka being able to make this pass and also being somewhat of a threat from 3 pulls Miles Turner out of the paint. So this is a really good example of some of the offensive synergy that the Hawks are getting with the type of versatility that they're putting on the floor. And then when Trey's off the floor, we get to see Dyson, which honestly, I think he should be doing this with Trey on the floor as well. And he does do it, but just a little bit more often. We get to see him attack and be more decisive. So here he has Miles Turner on him, who's a great shot blocker, but not a great defender. And Dyson's just going to use his twitchiness and his dribble. He's shifting Miles a bit. Here he goes to the hezzy, quick crossover. And now Miles is out of position and he beats him to the glass. And that's a really nice finish with touch. Left-handed, high off the glass before Miles can get to it. Beautiful finish. And he actually was able to get him twice in these types of scenarios. So here he's going to use like a speed boost in semi-transition. This is really nice to see. Dyson so brings the ball up the floor. He waits for Onyeka to clear through and seal off the paint from that secondary defender. Onyeka seals off Aaron Nesmith, and Dyson's able to beat Miles Turner to the rim. It's another great example of what he's doing in half-court scenarios, attacking the rim. So here he draws Benedict Mathurin on the inbound. Quick little jab. So you see that jab real quick to the outside, which sets up Mathurin and thinks that he's going to use that pick. But instead, Dyson wants to reject the screen. Notice how Matherin's body shifts on that jab. So he shifts to the right to try and get ready to go over the screen. Dyson reads that, drives. Then notice how he's going to split. He's splitting the defender here, but he's trying to avoid that dig from Ben Shepherd because of the spacing. So as he's driving with his left hand, he pushes the dribble out in front of him to his right hand, which keeps the ball away from the defender. And then as he gets in this middle area where he's really comfortable, he checks behind them, sees that no one's there, and goes into his floater, which is money. Let's see. Let's get another example of some of like the three-point shooting. Like teams are going to help off aggressively, so it's going to be important for him to do that, for him to be able to rise up and knock down shots. So notice how Halliburton is really trying to pinch this pick and roll, so he's going to help over a ton. Like he's in the passing lane basically, and Dyson rises up and knocks it down. He also hit this three earlier in the game with about 3 minutes into the game. So this is kind of a broken play. Trey's able to save it. Siakam is matched up against Dyson here, but notice how he stays home. He doesn't really respect him as a shooter. He wants to show help in the paint. There's 5 paces within the three-point line, and so Trey is able to get the ball to Dyson, kind of a half-outer contest, makes him pay. There are examples where he can be a little bit better around the rim, but what I like about him is that he's being very decisive when he's doing these things, right? So he's attacking off the catcher. Boom, one dribble. I'm gathering, keeping it high to keep it away from being poked away from Ben Shepherd. And I'm going to try and curl this around Miles Turner. Like this is a really tough shot. I think Miles did alter this, honestly. It's the type of rim pressure and the type of paint touches that the Hawks really need when they don't have Trey on the floor in particular. And this is just it's a nice defensive play for Miles Turner, but it allows Onyeka to tip this out or force that tip out, which then comes back out to the DeAndre Hunter, so the Hawks get another possession. And that's just the value of being able to drive to the rim. Even if you don't necessarily make the shot, just getting on the glass can cause things like that. He can be pushed off his base, which can sometimes lead to missed layups like this. So I really like this drive, but Matherin is pressing up on him. Honestly, probably a foul that goes uncalled, but if he doesn't have as much vertical pop there as he normally does. So I do think the hand was a problem. When you watch here, he's going to use a similar tactic to that change of pace / push dribble to get past the defender. So brings about the court. Notice how he switched hands and immediately gets to his left hand. Boom. I don't know if he necessarily had to step on Matherin here. This is also just a really good play by an athletic player. Here, they're kind of even. Matherin's still in good guarded position, and you're also driving into Miles Turner. What you probably want to see here is maybe a deceleration, a step into him. I think as he gets more reps, he'll get more comfortable there. But that's not the best decision. And one area where he still can grow a little bit, it's just the confidence. And this will come with reps. I'm fully confident that he can get there. So here, Trey's going to call for the screen. And one thing Atlanta does really well and do pretty frequently is they just have guys bail out of screens, right? So here, notice how quickly Dyson is able to open up and flash to the middle of the floor. And so that creates a huge passing angle for Trey because Tyrese Halliburton doesn't have the time to contain Dyson and contain Trey. So it's a quick little pocket pass underneath that dig. And as Dyson catches this ball, he has plenty of space to work with, plenty of time. It's a 3-on-2. You have a guy in the dunker spot. You have a guy in the corner. You have a lot of control in this position. But notice how Siakam kind of fakes him out. So I think Dyson was looking to see if he could pass this. Siakam sort of half commits, which makes Dyson think a little bit. I'm pretty sure he's looking at Don Barlow here, and it looks like he almost wants to pass it. And he ends up shooting it and comes up short. And he's really good in these scenarios. You can see he even makes a face like, why did I do that? And more often than not, they're going to convert when Dyson is in a 3-on-2 scenario because of his passing, because of his floater, because of everything that he can do around the rim. But he just has to be a little bit more confident in his shot right there. Just rise up and knock it down, man. Like, that's what you're in the game for. You're there to make those types of plays. And another guy who's finding his footing as of late, Zachary Rizachet had what I believe may be the best fourth quarter of any player in his draft class. He finished with 11 points in the fourth on 4 of 4 from the field, 1 of 2 from the free throw line, 3 rebounds, 2 assists. Over his last 5, He is averaging 13 points on 51% from the floor, 52% from three on 3.8 3-point attempts. And over the last 10, 42% from three, last 20, 35%. So he's trending up from that really, really slow start that he had, which is pretty typical of a rookie. One thing that's kind of hurting his efficiency is it the free throw line stuff. I'm not really sure. We saw, like, for example, guys like Luka. Not to say they're anything the same, but sometimes you have these guys who are good shooters that aren't great free throw shooters. It's not common, and typically guys who aren't great free throw shooters are streaky 3-point shooters. So hopefully he can figure that out because it's not always the best indicator. For example, Jaylen Brown is another guy who's a capable shooter, but not necessarily a good free throw shooter, and he can be very streaky. So I do think Reese Shea is better than what he's currently shooting at the free throw line, which is 68.5%. Could be rookies, could be jitters, could be getting used to the new environment in the NBA, like with fan distractions, whatever it may be. But I'm really, really happy with what I'm seeing from him offensively as of late. The aggression, the shot making. Once we go through these clips, I'll show you guys what his no dip three looked like on the broadcast. That was beautiful. So we're gonna go through his fourth quarter here, which was a masterclass. He played 11 minutes. I know that Quinn has gotten some flack for not playing him down the stretch, and I think he has I don't know if it's necessarily a minutes restriction, but the Hawks do have, because you have DeAndre Hunter and because at the time you had Jalen Johnson, it could be hard to justify closing with Reese Shea over Hunter if his shot isn't falling. But I think on a night like tonight where he really earned it, he was playing hard, he was on the glass, he was knocking down shots. I like to see that Quinn rewarded him with playing pretty much the entirety of the fourth quarter. He typically only averages 5 or so minutes in the fourth quarter. He ended up playing 11:48. So again, essentially the entire game. And it's because he can do things like this, right? First off, nasty fake. But notice how he's already moving and is able to catch Nembhard off balance when Dyson is sort of slicing around the lane. And so because he's already moving, he has Nembhard behind him. Halliburton is here. This is like, again, I just love how unconventional he can be as a scorer. So he sort of goes into this strange gather, which just opens up a massive gaping hole in the Pacers defense. Halliburton bites on it. And then from this point, he finishes with a scoop over Miles Turner. Really nice. Let's take a look at his offensive board that ended up being into 2 points. So Trey might have had Reese Shea here on the streak. It's a tight window. If anyone could make this pass, it's him. But the Pacers are like in line with him. So this is either going to be a foul or a block or a turnover, even if the pass gets through. So Trey opts to instead take this deep three, which I've talked about it a little bit on the pod. I do think I'd prefer him take these because you get scenarios like these, right? So the Pacers are not in position for an offense. They're the best position for optimal offensive rebound. Toppin's out of the paint. Thomas Bryant's at the top of the key. And so Reese Shea is being opportunistic here. He just goes straight up. Doesn't go over the back. Doesn't allow TJ McConnell to draw a foul. Just high points this ball above the smaller Pacers guys and then is able to get off the floor before Obi Toppin can come and try to disrupt his shot. I thought it was interesting too. Like if you watch him grab this rebound and shoot it, he goes up like he's about to shoot it with his right and ends up shooting with his left. Which to me tells me that he saw Obi in there and didn't want to get it blocked. Like that's some impressive mid-air improvisation from the rookie, knowing that Toppin was there and then switching hands so he couldn't get to it as easily. That's tough. Let's take a look at one of his assists. I thought this was really nice. So Trey gave it to him off the ball to bring it up. Him and Onyeka go into a 2-man. He loses Mathurin here. We're moving off the ball. So actually he's going for the handoff. Reverses course here. So Mathurin is out of position. And then look at the shooting gravity. Look how aggressively Siakam and Turner help. And then reading it, throwing it over the top. Patience by Onyeka to let Tyrese Halliburton fly by. And the Hawks get 2 points. Very, very poised possession from the rookie here. First with that sort of slamming on the brakes, then the pump fake to bring out 2 defenders, and then throwing it directly over the top to his big, who's flashing to the cup. And then notice Dyson coming in here just to make sure there's no offensive rebound. This 3 was at the tip of the quarter. Trey's orchestrating, gets off the screen. You see how aggressively Obi Toppin is helping. The Pacers are trying to keep it out in the middle as much as possible. Riche gets this up quickly with Toppin and help, knocks it down. And then this shot, which ridiculous shot from Trey. Again, notice the shooting gravity here from Riche, which he probably doesn't get if he doesn't hit those 2 threes. Nembhard and Shepherd don't know who's going to guard who. They're spinning around. Shepherd leaves Trey wide open. He misses his shot. Ball gets tipped out. Quick decision by Riche. The ball's barely in his hands. If he holds on to this any bit longer, the Hawks are not getting this shot off. And the ball arrives in time for Trey to shoot it here. He waits and jumps higher than I've ever seen him jump on a 3-pointer and knocks his shot down, which was a ridiculous shot at 6'1" over a 6'7" contest with his hands fully up. Like ridiculous shot. But this is made possible by the quick thinking of Riche. It pops in his hands. The ball is already out. The ball is already out before Nembhard could even adjust his course to X out the Trey. That's how quickly the ball comes out. Huge shot from Trey. And then I saw this. I was like, oh my goodness. This is some Nick Batum level no dip 3, right? Hawks are down 4. Trey's able to beat two paces down the floor from the full court pressure. Obi Top is trying to pinch. Trey delivers this pass high intentionally. Riche catches it high, keeps it high, and fires it and knocks it down. Beautiful shot. That is a no dip 3, ladies and gentlemen. And here's what it looked like on the broadcast and on the replay in slow mo. It's worth showing on here. Like that's how pretty it was. Let's see. Yeah, here it is. Trey throws the dime. Look where Riche catches it. Look where he keeps it. And look at the concentration over the contest. If he doesn't shoot this no dip, if he brings this down, it's definitely going to be a much tougher shot. He's able to knock that down. This is what they traded for. This is not traded. This is why they drafted him, to knock down shots like these. So very, very encouraging to see him finding his stretch, not just over the last couple of games, but over the last month. So that's all I have for today. My Hawks fans, man, keep your head up. Don't expect too much this deadline. I would be shocked if it's anything ridiculous, like I said earlier in the pod. Every indicator from what the Hawks have done is like they're very much committed to building sustainably over time, trusting the young guys' development. There's no rush outside of, I can understand why people may think that Trey may get a little bit unsettled, a little bit impatient, but I don't think there's any indicator that that's necessarily how he's viewing it this season. I think next season, that's when frustration would build, at least in my opinion, just because, they at some point they do have to win. And I know like at the beginning of the season, he said like James Johnson has to be on the court. Like that's how special he is. And this wasn't his fault. I don't think Trey would fault him for anything like that. But another season that follows the pattern that we've unfortunately been in for the last couple of years, I could see that really pushing the issue. But otherwise, I think the Hawks are still chugging along that path to being more sustainably built, really relying on continuity, getting guys empowered, letting the young guys cook. And hopefully we can see if we can get some sort of consequential return for Clint Capella or Bogey or both or DeAndre Hunter. I would keep all those guys available, keep the phones open. And I'll be talking back with you guys after the Pistons game. Y'all be safe.